Hi, I'm Becca, and welcome to Ask Repitcher webinar series. Today's topic is transportational engineering, which is a specialty of civil engineering. Today we are speaking to Abigail, who has 3 years of civil engineering experience working as a transportational engineer at a consulting engineering company. Abigail, how about we start with you talking about why you decided to work in transportational engineering?
Yeah, so I actually started in college with a structural engineering focus, and I thought that that was really the direction that I was going to go. I was very interested in focusing on bridges or maybe even buildings, still deciding that specialty. But after my first internship, which was a transportation internship, I was really enjoying that type of work, but there I still wasn't convinced. I thought that I would go into structures still. And then that next summer, I did a structures internship. And in that internship, I found that the work that I was doing and the work that I saw the engineers around me doing was a lot more technically focused, a lot more calculations or detail-oriented, as opposed to my time with the transportation team, where they were really focused on big picture ideas and coordinating large-scale projects and that type of work. Which really piqued my interest more. So it's my senior year, and I was still mostly on a structural track, but at that point I had decided, okay, I'm going to try transportation engineering.
So within transportational engineering, you say it's more broad picture. So within like the broad picture, is there specialties? Or is it just like, okay, what are they?
Yes, tons and tons of specialties within that transportation umbrella, just like there are tons of specialties within just engineering as a whole. So I'll try to give a brief overview of just a few of the options. So civil engineering, that's what I do. I'm a civil engineer who works in a transportation department. So as civil engineers, we focus on roadway design, as well as some site plans, as well as people who do drainage work and stormwater management all fall into that civil umbrella. So drainage, we're thinking mostly of stormwater and what we're doing with the rain when it comes, and stormwater management is how that water is being treated before we send it back into our waterways. Then there's structural engineering. So structural is, again, a subset of transportation. Those people are focusing mostly on bridges or retaining walls, or maybe like the sound walls that you see running along the highway, things like that. We have our traffic engineers. There's kind of a split in what you can do within traffic engineering. So one of those areas is focusing on more modeling and operations. So how we have this, roadway or whatever transportation infrastructure is built, and now how do we do the signal timings and get the cars to be moving efficiently on those roadways, or cars, pedestrians, bicycles, anyone that we're trying to get to move. A couple other engineering specialties within transportation can have your electrical engineers. Of course, we need street lights and we need tunnel lighting, and those are an important part of your transportation team. And a slightly more isolated group, you have your rail engineers who are looking at railroads and rail operations. And those are your engineers. And also you have, and I believe they're going to be talked about more in another webinar, so I won't get too deep into these, but you do have transportation planning, who are studying future operations and potential feasibility of potential future projects. And traffic modeling, who are looking far into the future of any type of modeling and what future conditions are going to look like. And we work closely with those groups as well.
So on your profile on repitcher.com, you said you work as your focus is on multimodal design and urban environment. Can you go into a little bit more detail about like what that means?
Yeah. So when we say transportation, we tend to think roadway and cars and vehicles and things like that. But in reality, transportation is moving all types of different things. So for me, when I focus on multimodal, I'm not just thinking about the vehicles. I'm thinking about how can we move pedestrians and bikes and the new scooters and buses and making subway systems and things like that accessible for people. And like I said in my profile, I do a lot of urban environments. So public transit is huge in the urban environments and making that accessible, and just helping people feel safe so that when they are, walking along the sidewalk or trying to bike from point A to point B, the car is the one who feels out of place. And we really focus on the safety of the pedestrians and the bicyclists who are trying to use that roadway.
How did you decide to do this? Like, how did you pick this focus?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I work, initially I started in a little bit more of roadway design, and that was fine, roadway by thinking more traditional roadways, so maybe a highway or just a road that focuses on cars. But I kind of got drawn towards the idea of pedestrian safety and as well as sustainability and how can we encourage more sustainable practices. So again, focusing less on cars and more on sustainable methods and making it safer so that people are more encouraged to use the sustainable methods.
So when you say you want to make things more sustainable, what do you take into consideration? Like, how do you determine what is considered sustainable?
Yeah, so again, from a broad standpoint, like I mentioned, just trying to encourage people to use modes of transportation that are sustainable, that are less vehicle focused. But even within our projects, sustainability is a focus. So every time that we start a project, we're usually starting with some sort of environmental assessment. So that isn't necessarily something that I complete, but I'm working with environmental engineers who are completing these assessments to figure out what are going to be the impacts to the environment and how can we work to mitigate those impacts to make sure that our designs are helping the environment as opposed to hurting it. As well as we're actually doing our designs, we focus a lot on research and sustainability, particularly when we're looking at stormwater management. If you have a road and a car driving on the road, they're getting all sorts of icky things on there, whether it's the oil from the car and lots of other gross stuff that you don't want in your water. So when we're talking about stormwater management and stormwater management practices, we're trying to treat that water before it goes back into our eventual rivers or oceans, lakes, to make that cleaner and better practice.
All right, so is there like a specific project that you have enjoyed working on in the past that is a good example of this, that encompasses everything that you just talked about?
Oh, that is a great question. So I'll focus on a project that we just recently completed in the Washington, D.C. area called Southern Avenue. We were working with the District Department of Transportation. So it was a project that was focused on safety. There had been in the corridor that it had some recent crashes relating to pedestrians and even a bicycle fatality. So we were looking at ways where we could reconfigure the existing roadway to have more space and more protected space for the bicycles that were there, as well as in some other areas look at maybe places that were not friendly for people with disabilities who were trying to walk along, or where maybe the lighting was really poor, so it just didn't invite people to come be walking along this corridor, and making those types of improvements, including areas where it's easier to get on and off the bus. And a big part of this project was stormwater management as well, and looking at the drainage and the utilities. Maybe there was an area where currently there would always be a puddle on the side of the road, so anytime it rains. So when you're on your bike, that's not ideal. Maybe you have to swerve around it, and that's kind of tough with traffic. So we're looking at how can we make this a better place and fix some of those issues, both from striping and from the drainage, from a pedestrian accessibility standpoint, to make it safer.
While working on this project, and I guess other projects too, do you work with other civil engineering disciplines? Do you work with geotechnical, structural, water resources?
Yes. There is almost never a project where you're just by yourself. You're always coordinating amongst your own team, as well as other teams and other disciplines. So in your basic roadway project, we'll say we'll keep it simple. We'll stick with just a roadway project. Maybe there we're starting with our traffic engineers, our traffic modelers, who are going to figure out how are people going to use this roadway in the future, and how many cars and bikes and pedestrians are actually going to be traveling along here. Then we send it to our geotech engineers, who are going to go out and take some soil tests, and they're going to look at that as well as the future use for the road, those numbers that our traffic modelers gathered, and figure out a pavement design, and a pavement that's going to be thick enough and sturdy enough to handle those future needs. Then from there, and that's all even in the preliminary design work, then it comes to our civil engineers, and there we have all of our civil engineers working together. So people who are focused on roadway, multimodal, who are looking at alignments and general geometry, as well as drainage engineers, and the people focused on stormwater management that we spoke about, our electrical engineers, in really the heart of the design, where we're kind of all coming together and coordinating amongst ourselves. Structural engineers, maybe even if it's just a roadway, well, maybe it goes up on a hill in one area and we have a retaining wall where we need to hold that soil back. Really requires a lot of coordination. Our landscapers, we need landscape architects to come tell us where the trees should go, and all sorts of things like that.
So when working on these projects, what college classes have helped you the most?
So that's a great question. So I'd say the first one would be my CAD classes, so my computer-aided drafting classes that really focus on the software and learning the software that really every engineer uses. Even if your university teaches a program that's not the same program you're not going to be using in the future, a lot of the core, I'll say, values of these programs are very similar. And almost every engineer is going to be using some sort of software, some sort of CAD software in their work. So that would be probably the first. The second class that was really helpful as I was starting out as an engineer, I took a project management class in college. Most project managers are, significantly further along in their career than I am. So it wasn't necessarily that I was learning in that class specifically how to step out into the real world and manage a project. But I was learning a lot of just in general about how the industry works. School and engineering in real life has quite a few differences, and the industry feels very different, and it's very fast-paced. So being able to kind of learn about that industry as a whole and general engineering practices was really beneficial.
Are there any classes that you wish you took in college that would have been helpful to you?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that for a second. Now, in my college program, like I said, I started out with a structural engineering focus. So my classes are pretty technical, and I stayed technical all throughout my college path. So I don't necessarily have a class where it's like, oh, I wish I had taken, reinforced concrete 3 or anything, specific from a technical standpoint. But I would say maybe either like a business economics class or some sort of policy class. Something that, again, would help round out that understanding of the industry as a whole and kind of where our clients are coming from. Because I'm a consultant, and I do what the client's vision is and what the client's project is, but to learn more about how the client comes up with that type of project and where the funding comes from and things like that.
So you would say non-technical skills are very important in your career?
Absolutely, yes. There's kind of the stereotype of, the engineer sitting in the corner with their calculator, just crunching numbers all day. But in reality, the engineers who are most effective and really go the furthest in their career are the engineers that have those strong soft skills, specifically focusing on communication. And engineering as a whole is so collaborative, and really requires that collaboration amongst your team and your discipline and the client and the public, that people who can effectively communicate will really go far.
So in college, they really emphasize working in groups and teams. They say that's like a big part of engineering. Do you do that in your career? Do you work in a team or group a lot?
Yes, yes. I think I can confidently say that most engineers never work by themselves on any project. Now, you may be working on a task by yourself, or you may be working on a task in a small group. But even if you're in that task by yourself, that task relates to other tasks and other disciplines who all need to come together to create these projects as a whole. So it's a daily occurrence that I am talking to my team members, whether that's people who are other civil engineers or just other people at the same company as me, or maybe at other companies that we're coordinating with, or coordinating with the client to really understand what their needs are and their vision for the project. It's every single day.
So then, while you're working like with your team and stuff, are you guys always in the office, or do you ever go out on site or in the field?
So for me, I would say I spend 98% of my time in the office. I'm mostly focused on the office. And when I am in the field, I'm primarily out there to gather information about existing conditions. So maybe we have a project that we're working on, or maybe it's before we've started the design, and we just want to get an idea of, okay, what's out there right now? Let's try to see how our potential ideas are going to fit into what the public currently sees, or what utilities are out there, or what trees are out there, things like that, or just observing traffic patterns. So I'm typically in the field observing, taking a lot of pictures. So that's not necessarily a regular part of what I'm doing. There are certainly lots of transportation and other engineers and coworkers of mine who are out in the field regularly, doing maybe construction inspections or construction management, but that's not necessarily part of my specific career.
So far, what has been the best part of your career?
Oh, good question. I think I'm going to answer this from two different kind of perspectives. I'll have a more of a general perspective as well as a transportation-specific perspective. So from a transportation perspective, I would just go with having the ability to really shape the environment that I'm in, that I am designing infrastructure in places where I live and I work and I play, and I really have the ability to go out and change those in a way that helps both me in my daily life, as well as those around me and the public as a whole. And that's a pretty cool feeling to see something improve because of something that you've done. From a general standpoint, of one of the best parts of my job thus far has really been my coworkers and my team. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to those who are looking for jobs on the job market, is to make sure that when you're interviewing, you can see yourself working with those people. Collaboration is a huge part of engineering, and being in an environment where you can learn from other people and feel like they're supporting you, as well as that you have the ability to really work with them and support them in your job.
Has anything surprised you while working as a transportation engineer?
Definitely the role of collaboration. We've kind of spoken about this some, but I hadn't realized quite the extent that my communication skills and my collaboration skills would be necessary. Whether it's, again, collaborating because I'm on a task and I'm trying to work with someone else, or maybe there's a task or an assignment that I'm in charge of coordinating, and I need to make sure that all these other disciplines and these other leaders are talking and coordinating their designs. And with clients, that's a huge part of it, is being able to verbalize, what your designs are to the client, to see if what you're thinking about is meeting their needs, as well as to be able to listen back and hear what it is that they're asking for. And another one that I think often gets overlooked is being able to communicate with the public. A lot of times, as part of our projects, it's our job to go to the public and say, hey, we know you live here and we're planning a project here, so here's what we're thinking about. What do you think? And gathering that feedback and really talking to them to make sure that we're doing designs that are a good idea on paper as well as in reality.
So it seemed like there were some surprises of when you started working. Was there anything that you wish you knew about transportation engineering on your first day that you didn't know already?
And this maybe kind of goes alongside the collaboration, but I wish maybe I had known a little bit of the importance of asking questions in the beginning. I think the school mentality kind of prepares you to do things on your own. You know, you're taking an exam and you're not allowed to ask the professor questions and your other students questions and things like that. Whereas, you know, in the engineering environment, you could read a manual 100 times and still not necessarily have the best idea, as opposed to someone who's just seen it before and has the experience. So being able to come into a room and learn how to ask questions and get feedback and work with people who, you know, have the experience, and it's kind of humbling when you first walk in, fresh out of school, when you get your first design back and there's red all over the place. But that's really how you learn, and by engaging with those around you and asking those really good questions.
And then, in your opinion, what type of people do you think like being transportational engineers the most?
Yeah, I think generally people who are focused on kind of the big picture. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're always working on huge projects. Sometimes maybe it's just a small sidewalk replacement. But where you're thinking less on, you know, the very specifics and the details, of course, those are important too, but you're thinking about how your designs are really going to impact the community as a whole, and you're interested in shaping those impacts.
All right, and then is there anything else you'd like to add, any advice you want to give to future transportational engineers?
Well, I think I gave my one piece of advice in your interview. And then the other one, just going into what I had mentioned that I wish I had known from day one, is just go in and ask questions and be open to learning from those who are going to be your coworkers and are going to really help you grow in your career.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. And if you want to see more about Abigail and other transportational engineers, go to readpicture.com, go to the people page and search on transportation. If you have any other engineering topics or questions or you want to be a guest host, please email us at info@readpicture.com. Thank you.